Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Dawson. Welcome to Leader Talk. This show is proudly brought to you by Brainiact. Each week we are meeting with incredible leaders from across Australia and around the world to discuss all things leadership and business insights. Each person coming on this show has given up their valuable time for one very clear purpose: to give back to small and medium business owners. In this episode, my co-host, CEO of Peerlike Gus Arianto, and I are excited to chat to Conrad Groenewald, CEO at Detmold Group. Conrad has global experience in organisations such as James Hardie, HealthShare New South Wales, and Visy. As an innovative and progressive leader, Conrad understands the power of collaboration and being a team player. Conrad has expertise in leading high-performing teams, generating a company culture around winning, and motivating stakeholders with his structured and profitable business strategies. Welcome to the show, Conrad.
Thanks very much, Natalie. It's great to be here.
Welcome, Conrad. So looking forward for this dialogue.
Good to see you again, Gus. Looking younger every day.
Hey, that's the spirit. When you eat noodles as much as me, you get younger every day.
That's the way.
Look, fantastic, guys. Conrad, as what we do with our guests on each episode, we ask them two fun questions at the very beginning. So if it's okay, I'll ask you your two questions.
Okay.
Now, the first one we'd love to know is, as a child, what did you want to be when you grow up?
I think originally I wanted to become a sportsman. I managed to play at a reasonable level of sport in both rugby and cricket, which in South Africa were the sort of staple sports at that stage. And I had aspirations to one day represent my country. And at the time, it wasn't even professional, but I wanted to make sure that I was in the mix for that. And the only reason I went to school was so I could play sport. All of our sport was done through school. There weren't many sporting clubs. So yeah, school kind of became a means to an end for me to go and play sport. So that was my dream back in the day.
Oh, fantastic. And Gus, yours was, correct me if I'm wrong, to be a teacher?
Yes, I always want to be a teacher, but don't forget, I also want to be a noodle chef. So I always have two plans just in case one fails.
Conrad, your first job, can we ask, what was your first job?
Yeah, my first job was, I guess, for a lot of teenagers, you end up somehow in hospitality, and I ended up behind a bar when I was doing my national service. So I did military in South Africa, and at the time I was actually working behind a bar, which was great fun. Taught me a lot, and that was the first paid job I got. I had volunteered as a lifesaver when I was growing up, but the first job that I actually did that I got money for, and sometimes we weren't paid in money either. We were paid in beers and beverages. So but it was still the first commercial job that I had.
Oh, that's fantastic. You were in hospitality as well, Gus, weren't you?
Yes, I'm in hospitality as well, but not as lucky as Conrad. I'm actually a kitchen hand, and it's actually teaching me a lot. One plate at the time. One plate at a time. I was working in one of the busiest Chinese restaurants, so you can imagine the amount of plates that come to my desk. I call it desk. It's like 100 and one plate at a time, and there is no free beer for me. It's only plates.
Look, all of this sounds so interesting, Conrad. And even yesterday when we're pulling together your, one paragraph bio that we could, do as the introduction, you have a really impressive story and career. And we were hoping you could just tell us a bit about who is Conrad, and a bit about Detmold Group as well, if you could.
Sure. No, thanks, Natalie. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I'm sort of going to talk around planning today, but it'd be fair to say I didn't have a plan. I wasn't one of those people who left university with a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. I've just always believed that if you do your best and you show up every day and you give your all, then doors will open for you, and that's certainly been the case for me. So from a career perspective, it's really gone full circle. So I left the army and went to go and study chemical engineering. in Natal in South Africa, and then joined a company called Mondi Packaging. They were kind enough to give me a scholarship, and then I worked back for them once I graduated. So I was in pulp and paper making, and that was really where I started my career. And in the early 2000s, I was approached by Visy Industries in Australia to help them start up their tumut factory in country New South Wales. So that was obviously a significant move for us. We moved from South Africa into Australia. That was what sort of paved the way for our immigration into country New South Wales, starting up a $500 million factory, which honestly was one of the most adrenaline-inspiring experiences that I've ever had. I developed a really good relationship with the owner, Richard Pratt of Visy, and then he asked me to go to Sydney and work at one of the recycling factories in Smithfield, again, still in pulp and paper. From there, ended up back at Tumut to help start up phase 2 of the factory, which by now was a $1 billion factory and a fantastic place. And then moved to Adelaide with Jebbs Cross, with Visy Board, to basically end the supply chain. Following on from that, I did a couple of years in the health sector, so working for Clinical Waste Company, and also for the government, New South Wales Health. So you'll be seeing far too much of some of my ex-colleagues on TV these days as they take us through the plan for the pandemic. So I headed up the shared services division of New South Wales Health, which provided all of the back of office services like food supplies, linen, shared services like payroll, etc. So following on from that, I then went kind of back towards my manufacturing roots and joined James Hardie Building Products, and that's where I had the pleasure of meeting Gus and lots of other great people in that business. I was the general manager for Asia Pacific, and then at the end of a pretty aggressive globalization strategy, I've now, as I say, gone full circle. I'm back in packaging in the Detmold Group. So the Detmold Group is, interestingly started, of course, as an SME. Started in Adelaide, founded in 1947 by the owner, and it's grown. It's now a global entity. We've got manufacturing facilities in 8 countries across the world. We specialize in food packaging, so hot cups, cold cups, food wraps, satchel bags, carry bags. We're now entering more into the retail space, so with partners like Uber Eats and some of those sort of satchel bags. So it's a really exciting place and a great company to be a part of. So I've been with them for 2 months now. Very steep learning curve, and getting in touch with what makes the business successful and making sure that I can build on that foundation, because it's a very strong foundation and a great business. And I'm really looking forward to taking it into the next level of growth.
That's fantastic. Do you see, Gus, why I struggled with the bio?
Yes, it is fantastic. Fantastic.
So look, Conrad, you've clearly been in a lot of leadership roles. I'd be keen to know what you think is the best kind of leadership style for organizational success in 2021, especially given the current situation. What would be your view on that?
Yeah, I think leaders with very strong value bases are going to be successful at this time. I think people with a real empathy and care for their teams, as everyone struggles. People are all dealing with this differently. Some people see it as a very temporary, transient phase that we're all going to go through and we're going to be fine. But you can't sort of take a one-size-fits-all approach, I think, to how people are dealing with it. So I think that the ability of a leader to be empathetic and certainly supportive of teams, I think is an absolutely critical success criteria at the moment. And then I also think So that's from the values side. I think from a leadership strength perspective, the ability to be creative and adaptable in these times. Things are moving and changing daily, and I've seen some businesses, particularly in the SME segment, really embrace that and take advantage of some of the opportunities that has come as a result of adversity. Always mindful though that some businesses just haven't been able to shift their model, and these are very tough times for those businesses as well. So yeah, I think that ability to be empathetic and supportive of your teams and understand what they're going through, or try and understand what they're going through, and then being creative and adaptable, and really quite agile, I think, in how you approach the environment now. That's kind of how I see it. How do you see it, Gus?
I could be biased on this. Obviously, I'm part of your team not long ago. Well, it's more than 5 years now, but so I can see firsthand how you lead, which is exactly what you say. I totally agree. I think I call it servant leadership, leading with heart, as at the end of the day, the only thing can save an organization during uncertain times are the fact that the people show up. When you mentioned before, when you graduate, you do not have any plan because you believe if you show up, you will be successful. And I think the ability of a leader to make sure the people want to show up, and we understand no one want to show up if they are under duress, it's a key skills. And from the intellect point of view, from the leadership strength, I think I agree with you. Courageous, making fast decision, creative, while still hold your values. I totally agree with you, Conrad, on this, as that's how we run it. That's how I wake up every day, or try to be like that every day. Yeah.
Fantastic. And then I guess going on from that, I'll ask you, Conrad, this question. What would be your advice for small and medium businesses wanting to generate great ideas in their organization? What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think you've got to create an environment where people are wanting to share their ideas, and then within that environment, you've also then got to try and create the vehicle by which people can do that. So yeah, it's one of the things that I think in the modern age we've lost a little bit of, and we used to have suggestion boxes at our workplaces. These days it's not a suggestion box, it's a suggestion chat room, or whatever the case may be. But I think making sure that you have a vehicle so that every voice in the organization can be heard. I think particularly now, what we're seeing is as organizations embrace diversity and bring more people with different ways of thinking about things, I think if you're not tapping into that resource, everyone has an idea. Okay, it may not always be the right one, but everyone has an idea. So making sure that you create that environment, and also, as I said, the vehicle by which people can provide those suggestions and ideas about the business, I think really helps in making sure you're tapping into this huge resource that we have as business leaders.
And I can add to that, Conrad. The challenges for a lot of leaders, I guess, we all wake up with a good intent. We create the vehicle, but unless you actually have a strong leadership capability and intent, what happens is you will always try to judge an idea based on your lens. Hence, I think I always love what Albert Einstein said. The minute you judge a fish for its ability to fly, then every idea that the fish actually give, it's redundant. I mean, the reality is, as a noodle shop, so today I'm a noodle shop owner, Conrad, if one of my staff said to me, hey, why don't we put Italian meatballs into the noodles and make it a menu? And if I really unable to actually explore creativity, I will actually block ideas. Doesn't matter how many suggestion box, doesn't matter how many, I'm actually the fault. I'm actually, as a leader, the main problem of generating ideas. And I think that for me is exactly what Conrad said. We can come up, we come up with all this, but as a leader, You need to actually allow that to happen.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, Gus, you touch on a really important point, is if you don't respond appropriately to that idea or suggestion, and you just shut it down, that person is going to be quite reluctant to come forward with another suggestion. So it might not be meatballs, but it might be cheese or something else. Yeah. And that's the feedback loop becomes super important. So it's not only you've got to give the vehicle to people, but also make sure then that you follow up with the feedback. Because to your example about the fish and the bird, if your employee comes to you and says, Gus, I think we should be selling motor vehicle parts. Yeah. That's somewhat of an out there sort of idea. And you've got to then be clear with the employee and the person and say, okay, that doesn't really align with our strategy. Our strategy is to become the best noodle shop in our area. That selling motor spare parts is really not aligned with our key strategy. But thanks for your suggestion. And so I think a lot of these suggestions, people don't circle back and give feedback to people, which is super important, because every time they come up with an idea, you can use it as a vehicle for engagement as well, and really reinforce that whole learning. We're a learning organization, and we're going to try and take as many learnings as we can.
Oh, I love that. Learning organization. That's what I love.
It is really interesting because you can get great ideas, but not everything you can actually take on board. So how you just explained of, cycling back that whole 360 to acknowledge it, but then, it doesn't align with a strategy. That's Correct. Really interesting. So keeping the team then motivated to stay on board, to stay on the journey to implement these kind of ideas, how would you suggest we keep them motivated and, really bring them on the journey?
Yeah, good question. And I think particularly these days with some of the COVID challenges and it's quite easy to get despondent about things. Not everything's going to work. I think that if I take some of the things that I've looked at through COVID, it's all of our cycles have sort of shortened. All of our planning cycles, our forecasting cycles, everything is kind of, we're living in a sort of 2 to 4 week cycle as opposed to a 3 to 5 year cycle in some areas. And part of that means that we should be celebrating the small wins and the quick wins. It's not always about celebrating only the destination. It's about celebrating some of the milestones. And even when you have a failure, that's still an opportunity to acknowledge the effort that's been put in by the team and the people. It's not, I think organizations that only celebrate big success, I think are going to find it quite hard to keep people motivated for these journeys, because sometimes in this modern day and age, just fronting up for work for some people is an achievement. And just let's celebrate the small wins and let's make sure everyone is motivated, inspired. Let's do things differently. Back to my point earlier around that creativity. Some of the things that we're doing online with our employees now, we have bring your favorite hat to Teams Day, and things that you would never normally consider. But these things create that energy and provide that wherewithal for the teams to really kind of dig a little bit deeper, front up to work the next day and say, yep, we're going to give it another go today. So yeah, I think it is more challenging, but it's not impossible. It's just about making sure you're keeping your teams engaged, keeping them motivated, and also having conversations, I think, that don't relate to work. The whole working from home concept, it's challenging, because you end up rolling out of bed in the morning, putting your clothes on, going and sitting behind a desk all day, talking about work. Your meals kind of get delivered to your desk, and the next thing you know, it's 9 o'clock at night and you're still sitting behind your desk having meetings. So I think breaking that cycle and just having a conversation, just ringing people up and having a conversation about, hey, how are the kids? What are you guys, what's the first thing you're going to do once travel restrictions are lifted, what's your destination for your next holiday? All those sorts of conversations. I think just break the work cycle every now and again to sort of keep people engaged and thinking about other things as well.
CNET, I'm biased about Conrad because I firsthand experienced his leadership, right? And this is why this is important for SME to actually understand this. When we're talking about breaking the cycle, ability to actually allow people not to talk about work so they have a break. The reality of SME, they have not enough resource to cover. But I always believe, unfortunately or fortunately, you cannot win on both. The reality is COVID, if we talk about COVID or whatever other pressure that come in the future, the people still have to be the priority because they the one who execute it. In the absence of a well-being of the people and in the absence of the performance of the people, doesn't matter what strategy plan, what doesn't matter, it's impossible. And I love the way Conrad mentioned about the small thing, bringing people come to the office with the different hats, doing a different creative stuff that make people engage. So important for performance. Yeah.
But just to add to that, I saw a really creative one the other week where the team wore their pajamas to a Teams meeting. Now, where would we ever have thought people will get together and have a professional team meeting wearing pajamas?
Absolutely.
It's that creativity and bringing that different side to what was usually very professional. You know what it's like. So
and it also engenders that if you look at leadership today, employees are looking to see some vulnerability from their leaders. And when you've got the CEO of an organization or the manager or the head of the noodle bar sitting in his pajamas, that shows that you're part of the team. Yes. B, you have empathy and you're thinking about your team and you're willing to show some vulnerability, which I think is fantastic these days for leaders to show.
Yeah, I definitely think it's lovely to see. You mentioned celebrating small wins. Gus, I wanted to ask you about that because you do that all the time at Peerlight with your Peerlight Proud campaign.
Yeah. So once again, it's crazy to think that all my leadership capability just come by itself. Obviously, I come from an organization that Conrad lead as well. So all these things that I share back to my organization, I learned from someone as well. In this case, obviously, from Conrad. Yes, we do a lot of small celebration. I totally believe in what Conrad mentioned before. We all have a goal. We all want to go to the Everest. I'm just putting an analogy here. The problem is only few can get there. And if we are unable to actually celebrate the fact that we arrive in the base camp, even base camp is big, even the fact that we actually put the first step, even the fact that we actually going to the shop before the first step to buy the jacket. I really believe in that. So at Peerlight, we do that a lot. We focus on what we can control. And I think organization that only use leg as a metrics, means that numbers as the main focus will be finding it hard to move in this dynamic. At Peerlight, we focus on both lag and lead. So if the people do not achieve the numbers, yet they achieve the process and the discipline to get there, we celebrate them. We certainly do not focus on what I call a lucky number. There's a lot of people say, hey, we are good because we produce X $1 million sales. And I said, what exactly you do? Nothing. I know the client for 20 years. Well, I don't think you actually know what to do. Right? The guy that is just entered the business, making 100 phone calls, doing $1,000 sales, I celebrate him equally. Sorry, I get passionate about this thing, about, focusing on, sorry, I forgot I'm actually in the live show. So back to you.
No, it's okay. One that I've been wanting to ask you, Conrad, in your opinion, what qualities do you actually think are lacking from leaders today? It's always been an interesting topic, and times are obviously very different, as we've mentioned.
Yeah, I think, and look, I'm speaking from a personal perspective. I've had the benefit and been fortunate to work for some fantastic leaders. Similarly, I've had the misfortune and the benefit to work for some very, very ordinary leaders. And I think the first thing to note is that I've learned equally from both of those groups, because you learn what to do and you learn what not to do. And I think that's kind of key. I think at the moment, one of the things that's really tripping leaders up is authenticity. And I think if you didn't have a genuine connection with your people prior to the global pandemic, you can't create one during these times. That's extremely, extremely difficult. So I think leaders who lacked authenticity and leaders who lacked some of the genuine care and compassion for people, you can't create it in this environment. It's not possible. So I think that's, if you look at some of the examples of organizations that have really struggled, I think that's a good place to start putting the responsibility is don't be unauthentic in your approach, and just be very clear and transparent in communication, and people relate to that.
It's very clear. What's your view on that, Gus?
So if you know, Nat, I spoke to you so many times about this. There is a time where Superman, I'm a Superman fan, so maybe other people, looking at Batman, but I'm a Superman fan. There's a time where Superman is the picture of a leader, a guy that understand and know and how to do everything. You look at something, you can put laser through the eyes and everything burn. But like what Conrad said, the connectivity and the authenticity matter. And unfortunately, there's only one Superman. And the minute you are unable to show your authentic self, which is including your strength and weakness, you can't connect. And to be able to do that, leaders have to be honest to the situation and transparent, and also honest to what they do not know. I'm a big believer that I always say throughout my organization, we are committed not to judge a fish by the ability to fly. And I say to all my leadership team, I say that the minute you start testing people for what they don't know, I will test you for what you do not know. How would you feel? And for you to be able to be consistent around this, come back to what Conrad said. You need to be authentic. That's my view.
Yeah, it's simple, isn't it? It's when you think it's just be authentic. And I guess it ties back into values then, doesn't it? Live your values, bring them to life.
Correct. And I think, I think one of the challenges and drawbacks of the high level of activity we see in the leadership space is that there's so many people trying to coach leadership and provide examples of leadership. And I think people are getting a little bit confused around, okay, should I be managing? Should I be an authentic leader? Should I be a servant leader? Should I be a situational leader? And in all honesty, just be the leader that you are. Just be the people will respect you and relate to you a lot more if you just yourself. Just be yourself. If you approach certain situations in a certain way, and you understand your biases and you understand some of the things that you are good at, and as Gus said, that you're not good at, that's the conversation to be having with your organizations and your teams. Don't try and be something that you're not, because the other thing is, we, particularly under pressure, we will generally default back to our preferred natural style. Mm-hmm. So if that happens, then from a credibility perspective, your teams will be looking at you saying, hang on, who's this guy? This is not the guy who's been around and being the player coach and, morale. And then all of a sudden, when the chips are down, the angry man comes out, the Hulk comes out. That's quite damaging to people. Trust is just such an important element of leadership. And when people don't think you're being authentic, that's an immediate red flag. And if you then back it up with unauthentic behavior, I think that just creates a level of mistrust that you can't really afford in successful leadership these days.
Yeah, very nicely put. We can discuss leadership for the full hour, but I know we need to get onto the planning side of things. And I know when we had our discussion, what really stuck with me was that quote, and I have it written down here because it was really powerful. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And I know that's what we're going to be discussing. So to kind of kick it off, Conrad, you've mentioned to us previously in our discussion the importance of planning, and it means different things to different people. How would you personally best describe this?
Yeah, I think when people hear the word planning, they immediately go to a project plan or an itinerary, and I think what I encourage SMEs to do is don't drop down to that level too early. So when I'm talking about planning, I'm talking about business planning, and that's kind of all encompassing. It covers the entire spectrum from, okay, what is our vision? Where do we want to be? Where do we want to position ourselves? What is our purpose? What is our mission? And then, okay, what is our strategy? So it's all encompassing, and the actual plan drops out of all of those sort of key headlines. So I'm fortunate enough to sit on the board of a couple of SMEs, and I find that the concept of planning is a real tension point for them, because the bias is for activity, and the bias is for let's do things, let's go and implement something, and that's fantastic, and there's a place for that for sure. But if you don't have a plan, the other quote that I've heard is if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So when I'm talking about overall business planning, it's not just about the project plan. It's around, okay, what is our North Star? What is our guiding light that we are going to pin every decision that we make as a business to? So if I'm running a noodle shop, what is my vision? Do I want to be the best noodle shop in the region? Do I want to have the biggest range of noodles, of recipes? Do I want to be the lowest cost noodle shop? These are all things that you've got to try and be quite purposeful about right at the beginning, as early in the journey as possible. Because without that North Star, SME particularly, you're resource strapped. So you've got to be really clear that every resource you're using is being used on something that aligns to that North Star and to that vision. So it's all encompassing, Natalie. I don't sort of just pull out the little plan and say, okay, if you don't have a plan for that, because environments will change. We've seen that with the pandemic. Now, if your vision was to be the best noodle shop on the block, then the global pandemic has certainly thrown a spanner in the works of your, let's call it your 3-year roadmap. But it hasn't destroyed your vision. Your vision is still intact. You may have to navigate slightly differently around the current challenges, but your vision and your goal of being the best noodle shop on the block is still intact. So
sorry, Conrad, and I like what you said, Conrad, because when we spoke about this initially to bring this topic, you remind me a lot of SME very energetic and passionate with their ideas. They start the business, they left everything because the idea of the business. And I agree with you. In the absence of that plan, you will derail to where you want to go, because you don't even know where you want to go because of your excitement. I just want to cook the best noodles, yet we do not even know what the best noodle looks like.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and go ahead, Natalie.
I was going to say, just to add to that, when there's been situations we've had to write copy for small or medium businesses, and obviously we need to understand the vision, mission, and values of a business. And there have been situations where, whether we're writing case studies, web copy, or, you know, whatever it is, where there is no vision and mission and values, because the perception is that we don't need that. And listening to what you're saying is that actually helps formulate your plan. You need that to actually write the plan. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's a great misperception that you've called out. And I often get that. As I said, I sit on a couple of boards, and the first thing that I sort of get the view is, yeah, but we're not big enough. You're running corporate businesses. They need, and I think also it's important to note that it doesn't have to be a 10-page glossy document with a, you know what I mean. And I think that's also one of the misconceptions is it can be as simple as the example that I use. Richie McCaw, for those rugby players, arguably one of the best rugby players in the world. His plan was on the back of a napkin that he wrote when he was in a store in New Zealand. He was talking to his uncle, and he said he wanted to be an All Black. And that was written out. So they sketched the map towards how he could do that. And then his uncle said, well, do you want to just be an All Black, or do you want to be one of the best All Blacks ever? And again, similar sort of context, right? And he said, I want to be one of the best All Blacks ever. And you know, again, arguably, and I'm sure there's lots of Australians who are sort of throwing things at the screen right now about me mentioning Richie McCaw. Keep in mind, I'm a South African and a Springbok supporter, so it's difficult for me to do it as well. But I just thought that's such a good example where it doesn't have to be a huge headline. It doesn't have to be a glossy marketing presentation. But irrespective of the size of the organization, if you've got your vision and you've got your purpose, you can relate to that every day. Every decision that comes across your desk, if you've got your North Star and your vision, and you can say, does this align with where we are wanting to go as a business? And if the answer is no, then it goes and you park it to the side. And yeah, so I think that's a great misperception that you highlighted, Natalie. And I really encourage SMEs to take the time and think about what do we want to be when we grow up, right? As a business, because the energy and the enthusiasm that comes from SMEs, it's so infectious, and people want to go out and do things, and they come up with the most amazing ideas. But if you can't attach it to something, it can become a challenge to stay on track as well. So yeah, it's a great call out, Natalie.
And what I learned from this conversation right now is the fact that once you have your North Star, your vision, your mission, your purpose, how do we plan financially, strategically, become very clearer? It's clearer. Yeah. If your vision is to be the largest noodle shop, like McDonald's style noodle shop, and today I only have one, then to actually make a lot of creative adjustment to the noodles will never get me there, because noodle chain have to have standards. So I need to start from day one doing that. Now this is what I learned. What's your view? So if I ask you this in context of that, say as a noodle shop, for example, how do we plan financially and strategically in the back of our North Star? Where do we start? How do we become disciplined about that? In the high level question, of course.
Yeah, I think what you said there is really important. If you have the right North Star and the right goal and objective, all of that, let's call it that second tier planning around resources, finances, operational excellence, all of those sort of things, they become easier. Again, back to that analogy, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So if you don't have the North Star, planning financially becomes almost impossible because you don't know what your objective is. So yeah, you need that goal to then say, okay, to your example, I want to be a global noodle shop. Okay. So I've then got to think about what are the decisions that I need to make today that are going to enable that. And the sort of phrase that I often encourage people to use is, let's start as we want to finish. So let's make sure that we've got the end in sight, and all of our behaviours, every brick that we lay in that foundation is going to be necessary for that long-term goal. And then your plans drop out of it. So if you're wanting to, even if you're not wanting to become a global noodle, if you just want to have five noodle shops in the local region, well, you've then got to decide, okay, do I think I have the capability to start up all 5 at once? Yeah. Well, okay, no, I don't think so. I think I'm going to start with 2 this year. And then that drives your financial decision making, and that drives your employment decisions, and it drives how much you're going to invest in training. So again, it comes down to how clear you are about your destination and about how you're going to approach that roadmap. And then the plans literally drop out of that, because you've got that North Star, you've got that ability to say, does this align with our strategy? And if it doesn't, then you scrap it. And that's the other thing, I think, Gus and Natalie, that's really important. And one of the things that I know we drove pretty hard at James Hardie, Gus, is be very clear on what you are going to do, but be just as clear on what you're not going to do. Mm-hmm. Because those become the distractions. And again, SMEs, we know that they're always tight on resources. So they can't afford to be distracted. They can't afford to not be clear on what they are going to do and what they're not going to do. Because if they're investing time and resources in the things that they're not going to do, that's going to prevent them from investing time and resources in the things that they are going to do. So the plans drop out of that, I think.
And this is, if you really see it from leadership point of view, why, this is my personal view, why a lot of leaders fail, whether it's a leader of an organization or a leader of SME, in the absence of clarity, you can't actually take the people into the journey because they get frustrated.
Correct.
Even the owner, I'm as a noodle shop owner become frustrated because one day I wake up, I want to be global. The next day I wake up, I want to have 2. The next day I wake up, I want to actually open a spaghetti house. Like this disruption become problematic. So I think why we decided to bring Conrad topic to the surface for the SME is the topic is not, to be honest, this is how I put it, we're bringing a topic called planning. This is not a topic that people actually comfortably want to hear on Thursday morning, right? But in the absence of discipline around this, your leadership capability will be challenged, your clarity will be challenged, and then it impact everything that you want to do. So thank you, Conrad. I love when you said, well, can you repeat again? Let's start with, when you say, I like that.
Destination.
Let's start as we want to finish.
Yeah.
So
they're powerful.
All of our behavior, if we want to be a global business one day, our behavior has to align with that. If you want to be a business partner in 5 noodle shops, for example, you've got to portray the behaviors and the leadership of somebody who's going to do that. So it's really you're getting things in place, and there's a caveat to that, and I'm sure that there's probably people in the audience thinking, that's easy to say if you've got resources of people and you've got teams of people to go out and do this, and resources is certainly beneficial, but that doesn't stop you from making sure that the processes that you put inside your organization and your business are scalable. And if your plan is to scale up, then think about that in your decision making. And back to your point, Gus, if you're waking up from day to day, and one week you're saying, right, we're going to be a global force, and the next week, no, you know what, we're just going to stay in Australia, and then the next week after that, you know what, we're just going to stay in our suburb. Those things are fine, but you can't lead an organization like that, because you'll create confusion, and people will be like, well, hang on, then why are we, if we're just going to be local, then why are we translating our menus into 5 different languages, for example? So it's definitely helpful, I think, if you have the end in mind. Start as you want to finish.
Isn't it lovely, that example? I think this is the key of all it. You know, if you want to be local, yet you actually asking one of my staff, which is, I'm a small noodle shop, so I got students working for me and said, hey, can you create the menu in 5 languages?
Yes.
Well, maybe there is 5 language, ethnics in my suburb, but it still need to be clear as well, because instead of asking the staff to clean the restaurant, the staff will be busy doing something. So I love this, the example that you put, Conrad.
And I think part of that as well, and particularly in the SME space, is be very clear on what you're good at.
Yeah.
And play to your strengths. Be very clear, if you are the noodle shop, why are people going to buy your noodles as opposed to other people's noodles? And again, stay true to that throughout your journey. If that's your differentiator, if that's your source of competitive advantage, that's what you're good at, then keep playing to those strengths throughout that journey. And you'll find that there's a loyalty that also drives the right behavior. If everyone, all of your teams, whether you a team of 3 or a team of 3,000, if everybody knows what you're good at and they keep playing to those strengths, it becomes extremely difficult for competitors to get in your space.
Yeah, this is really interesting. And I've got a question for both you, Conrad and Gus. You're a small business and you're busy. You have limited resources, like you mentioned. If there was one bit of advice you can give them about the importance of planning, what would it be? So for any of those that go, too busy, sounds really difficult, which you've just explained, can be as simple as writing it down on the back of a napkin. What piece of advice would you give them?
My advice would be consult as widely as you can. The benefit, one of the benefits of large organizations is diversity, as we spoke about earlier. So if you've got 20 people on your management team and you've got a diverse group, you will get strengths. All of those people will have strengths and weaknesses, and they'll help guide the business. Sometimes when you're an SME, you've got 1 or 2 people. The risk there is you're not really able to diversify your thinking. So go outside of your business and speak to as many people as possible about your vision, about your purpose. Speak to the most. Sometimes it helps to speak to the most pessimistic person that you know, and really get them to rain on your plan. I guess because sometimes those pessimistic people will identify potential roadblocks for you. Don't always surround yourself with optimistic people who don't see any obstacles to growth. Make sure you're consulting as wide a range of people as possible. That whole consultation, you're not in it alone. I think that's the other key message for SMEs. People think because they don't have scale, they don't have the gravitas and the ability to go and consult with people. And that's not true. There's a lot of people. Look at this initiative that Gus has started. There's a lot of people who do understand the economic significance and the importance of SMEs. People who are willing to take time out and help this group grow, because my business that I'm running at the moment started as an SME. Visi Industries started as an SME. James Hardy started as there's no businesses these days. No business starts as a $3 billion entity. So we've got to encourage that group, and they've got to consult and ask lots and lots of questions and get that diversity so that they can take all of that into their think tank and say, okay, I've now got a lot more information on which I can base my decisions. And again, there are people out there who are very willing to help and give their viewpoints. So yeah, I think consult as widely as you can, particularly if you've got a small business, because otherwise you're only really able to get 2 or 3 opinions. And again, in an SME, what interests my boss fascinates me. So if you're the leader of an SME and you've sort of given your perspective on things, well, the reality is that your employees are more than likely to agree with you, which is not always healthy either. So I think, my advice would be cast the net as wide as you can, ask lots and lots of questions, and consult quite widely.
That's great. And what's your view on that, Gus?
And I, on top of what Conrad said, because I agree, when you open your mind, you suddenly see a lot of people want to help. Just even using the Leader Talk. I've been talking about this for 3 years. The minute we have the platform, I have the first 10 speaker, and thank you, Conrad, number 5. We spoke about yesterday. The minute you ask for help, it will open your world. The problem is come back to initially what Conrad spoke about around leadership. Leadership is not when you become a leader of a $3 billion company. A leader is a noodle shop owner. A leader is a dad. The question is, do you want to ask for help? And small business do not have time. And you don't have money because the money need to go back to the business. Now, you have 100 people that can give you insights. The question is, do you want to hear for the insights? Number 2, coming back to your question, how do I say it without, I think it's not a choice. You need to put the time to plan. And leading to that, I want to ask Conrad something very interesting around this. Once you have the North Star, once you have the plan, let's put discipline as a topic here. Because in the absence of discipline, the whole thing will become the next day I'm changing from noodle shop to spaghetti bar because it's just too difficult. So Conrad, following the questions, I want to say, how do you lead with all the authenticity, leading with heart, try to make sure the people are inclusive, kind, without jeopardize discipline? What's your view on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think too many leaders rely entirely on discipline, and too many leaders rely entirely on more of a sort of, as you say, kumbaya type approach where, making sure everyone is happy. And I think what I would say is people are intrinsically motivated by a sense of achievement. So nobody really wants to just sit around and sing kumbaya and have a really fantastic, everyone's arms around each other, but we've achieved absolutely nothing. That sense of achievement is within every single human being. People are motivated by that. They're inspired by that. So keeping the discipline is around making sure you have your project plan. You have your regular check-ins. So you're monitoring your progress relative to the plan. If there's a variation in the plan, nip it in the bud. Make the decisions early. Don't allow the plan to get way off track and then try and recover 6 months of lost time in a week. So having that regular cadence, and again, small to medium businesses will often say we don't have time for a management system. And again, it doesn't have to be an elaborate management system. It can just be, okay, we've got a milestone checker, and every fortnight or every month we're going to get together and report on progress to milestones. That drives that culture of accountability. So yeah, it's not about the big stick. It's about making sure people are held to account, and generally people want to be held to account because they want to achieve. So yeah, I think it's a good question though, and I think there's there are definitely opportunities for businesses, particularly in the small to medium. Have the plan, have the little project plan, and keep monitoring those milestones. And that also gives you the opportunity to celebrate success.
And Conrad, yesterday when we had a brief discussion, I mentioned, planning all sounds great, but now we've got COVID and, planning, we can't kind of plan long term. It's kind of shorter time frames. And you shared this really great analogy of, going on a trip, I think it was from Sydney to Melbourne. And do you mind sharing that? Because I found
with the
really
tire puncture in the middle.
Yeah. So sure, I use that quite a lot actually, because I think if we can break things down into analogies, it makes it
Yes.
far more real. So if your North Star is, and you're living in Sydney, and your North Star is you want to travel to Melbourne, you will draw up a plan, and you'll make sure that your car is maintained, and you've got enough fuel, and you know where the fuel stops are. You've got food. You might have a plan. You might get into some really detailed planning around where you're going to stop and what food you're going to pack. And you merrily into your plan, 2 hours into your journey, you get a puncture. That doesn't mean that you throw the plan out. It simply means you stop and think and you readjust. Your North Star hasn't changed. Your North Star is still to get to Melbourne. Now, you've had a setback, absolutely. There's no denying that. And you hopefully, if you've planned appropriately, you've got a spare tire that is ready to go, and you put the spare tire on, and it's a setback. And at that point, you might need to make some adjustments. So if you've got an appointment at your North Star and you're not going to make that appointment, you may need to then immediately make sure that the person who you're going to realizes that you've been set back by an hour, or you may have allowed that contingency in your original plan, which I think most of us would do for an important appointment. So I think the key is to differentiate between what is a setback and what is an actual showstopper. And very rarely are there significant showstoppers in business. There will on occasion be, but honestly, there are not that many. It's really the interruption to plan that's far more common. Now there's anyone who has a business plan that goes ahead without any obstacles or hindrances or competitor reaction or lack or missing a deadline. The reality is they're just not trying hard enough, and they're making it too easy, because there are always going to be obstacles and there's always going to be headwinds. And the difference between success and failure is how you respond to those. Because if you throw the North Star out every time you hit a bump in the road, you're never going to be able to continue with the journey. So yeah, I think that's where that resilience and that's where you build some of that sort of internal resilience for your business, and that's how you show the people within your business that, yeah, you know what, we've had a setback, we're going to make this adjustment, we're going to pivot, we're going to be agile because we're operating in this short-term cycle, and we're going to continue on our journey. I think that's sort of the analogy that we spoke about yesterday, Natalie.
So powerful.
It is. And Gus, I think we can agree that anyone listening that doesn't have a business plan or a plan will go away and make a plan based on everything you've discussed now, Conrad. You've just made it. Sorry, Gus.
It's necessary. I think it's
absolutely necessary.
Fantastic. And look, everyone, I'm just looking at the time. We've actually reached the end of our show. So thank you so much, Conrad. Gus, I know you like to do a wrap-up of kind of what we've learned. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think to wrap up, but before we wrap up, I just want to congratulate Conrad in the new journey with Detmold Group. I think the organization very lucky and very fortunate to experience your leadership. I experienced your leadership firsthand. Whatever you mentioned is actually stay with me as well. Planning that we talk about, while it sounds difficult, unfortunately is needed. You do not have to plan with a glossy 20 pages professionally checked by experts, but you certainly need to understand your North Star, and then coming down to your values, mission, vision, and then coming down to your strategy, and making sure that you understand. I like what Conrad said. Understand whether it's a setback or it's a roadblock. Like it's don't think setback as a roadblock, because you don't want to say you want to own noodle shop and then the next day you want to own a barber shop, and then the day after you want to become a different company again. So thank you so much, Conrad, for your time. We appreciate your time, and you donating one of the most valuable things people have, which is time. And SME all over the world will be very fortunate to be able to learn from this. Thank you.
Thanks,
Natalie.
Thank you, Conrad. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. For more information on Leader Talk or for some great resources to help your business grow, check out brainiac.com.au. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.